In 3, 2.
Opening lines, take 1.
Whoa, Corey. Hey, what the hell are you doing here, buddy?
Oh, my bad, wrong show. But you did invite me. So.
This is Unscripted Ohio. Oh yeah, I did invite you, didn't I? Gosh, my bad. I forgot I told you to come on the show. I was thinking you're in the wrong place. Well, opening lines is my responsibility here on Unscripted Ohio. We've got Ohio State Buckeyes dancing coming up next on Unscripted Ohio.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
It is Unscripted Ohio. I am your host, Kyle Lamb, and apparently I forgot I invited my buddy Corey Thompson, co-host of Scarlet and Gray. Corey, glad you could make it and join us. Apparently I'm forgetful.
I'm really hurt that you forgot that. I'm a pretty big deal. I'm a pretty big guest for your show.
Well, I've been told by Johnny you've got a forgettable face.
He's not wrong, but I expect that from Johnny. From you, that's just hurtful.
I'm sorry. I didn't say I agreed with it. I'm just passing along the message. So don't kill the messenger.
This time I won't anyway.
Yeah, okay. Well, we are the Unscripted Ohio podcast. We are brought to you by Buckeye Grove and also our new sponsor, our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye, licensed in 33 states and more waiting. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys, so visit them at jfqlending.com. So Corey, it is March and we are in a basketball mood. Ohio State coming up with a huge win on Thursday over Indiana in the Big Ten basketball tournament. We'll talk a little bit of football later too, but it is March and we are in survive and advance season. And Ohio State really, they definitely survived. They got up by 20 in the second half. It got a little dicey there at the end. Indiana cut it down to, I think it was a 2-point game. They got it down to there in the final minute, but Ohio State did win the game. I'm on record. I'm saying this win is enough for Ohio State. You can take it to the bank, regardless of what they do today, Friday. We're actually recording on Thursday, but regardless of what they do Friday against Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament, I am marking it down. You can take this to the bank. Ohio State will be in the NCAA tournament come Sunday on the selection show. What say you?
I agree. And what seed do you think they'll be? I think they'll be a 12 like they've been projected.
I actually think, you know what? Here's the thing. I actually think they're going to be higher than people have been projecting them. I think because of these last 3 losses being mitigated by the absence of Caleb Weston and the way they played with him on Thursday. They didn't just beat Indiana. They got up by 20 in the second half, and they led for 39 minutes in this game. I think that is going to be enough to actually get them another seed line or 2 higher. I could see them as high as the 10 line. I'm going to say the 11 line, and they stay out of Dayton, out of that first 4, and actually make it into the bracket without playing in those first set of games in Dayton. So I'm going to say an 11 seed, but I could see them as high as a 10 seed. And again, I attribute this just to the fact the committee is going to look at this Ohio State team and say, you know what? It's a little bit better than the way they played without Caleb Weston, and we have evidence of that. Caleb comes back. Remember the game he played before the suspension, they dominated Iowa. The game he comes back after the suspension, they dominate Indiana. I know the score is only going to show a 4-point win, but it was a dominant performance. So I think Ohio State will be in a situation the committee can look at them and say, yeah, this is a team that is probably a little bit better than these teams right at the end of the bubble. So I'm saying an 11 seed myself with a possibility of a 10 seed.
I think that's reasonable, and I think what we'll also factor in if we go into the game itself is how Indiana came back was a little fluky, I would argue. So I think the committee will look at we'll look at that and say, you know what, Ohio State, like you said, Kyle, they did dominate. Yes, it became a 4-point win, but it wasn't as if Indiana was just dominating in dominant fashion trying to come back. They were throwing up haymakers and just throwing up prayers, and God was answering.
Thank you for saying that, because I feel validated. I feel like somebody finally agrees with me on this. You know, so many people were saying Ohio State almost choked that game away. And I get, you know, anytime you almost blow a 20-point lead, that's not good. You certainly did some things that let the other team into the game. But this wasn't like a traditional choking a game away. I mean, look at Wisconsin. They didn't score, but like I think 2 points or 5 points like they've scored like 5 points in the last 8 minutes of that game. I mean, they really did almost choke. And not to say Ohio State didn't have a part in that, but in this game, you know, Ohio State finished with 79 points on 76 possessions. Okay, they scored 16 points in the last 7 minutes of that game on 14 possessions. So they ended the game the way they were basically playing the entire game. Their offense really didn't change that much. They had a few unforced turnovers, a few mistakes, but they were still scoring. The weird part about this is Indiana scored 32 points in their last 15 possessions. That's like what, 2.3 points per possession. You can only average about 3 points per possession at max. So Indiana was just absolutely on fire. I didn't think Ohio State was choking that game away as much as, like you said, Indiana hit 9 out of their last 10 3-pointers if you don't count that chuck at the end. I mean, they just got insanely hot to finish that game.
Yeah, it was flashbacks of Purdue all over again, except we were on the winning side, thankfully. You know, my father and I, we always watch these games together, as I mentioned on every podcast I've ever been on. And he and I like to bounce ideas off each other as we're watching the game. And I swear, every time they chuck something up, I'm like, now you watch, Dad. 5 minutes ago, it's all going to go in now. They're all going to go in. Because they hadn't been making anything all game, really. And yet, all of a sudden, everybody. It doesn't matter who it is they're hitting them. It just doesn't. The big guy or 55, I can't remember his name. Green was hitting him. Green was hitting him all game. I'll give him that. But it just didn't matter who was shooting them. It just, they got hot, and they were shooting them from obscene distances, 25 feet, 28 feet. That chuck at the end of the game, I half expected that to go in, just because they were making everything. It didn't matter. I didn't even think it was bad defense. They weren't completely open shots. Andre Weston, especially on the perimeter, was getting a hand in people's face. He was getting back in time. What do? You just can't do anything about it. I thought the only thing they did wrong in the final minutes, and I understand why they did it, I just didn't completely agree with it. They played a little soft underneath. They were getting some chip calls. You know, Langford, I remember his putback in between 3 Buckeyes frustrated me a little bit. It's like, there's three of you there. Get a rebound. But they just put their hands up and let the chips fall where they may, because you know you didn't want to have opportunities for them to get 3 points from the traditional way, rather than the 3-point line. You can't blame the Buckeyes for letting them have looks from 25 feet. That's just, you know, you want Indiana taking those shots instead of having easy buckets.
Well, and you know what? And the scouting report was they were doing everything they could to get a body on Romeo Langford. Do not let him drive. They were trying to contest shots in the paint, both with Morgan and Langford. They were willing to give Green those shots. And I tell you what, you know, if I had to do it all over again, if I'm a coach, I would continue to let him take the shots he was taking, because, yeah, I mean, he was insane. But like you said, he was hitting them from 25, 26, 28 feet away. And, you know, if you're playing the scouting report, that's the shots you can live with. If they're going to keep making those, you live with it. And I was having a conversation as the game was going on, and right before the run happened, when they got up almost by 20, I think it was 15, and then it went to 18, and then 20, or something like that. I was having a conversation with a friend, and I've mentioned this friend on the podcast before. He's kind of not to brag, but he is kind of a high roller in Vegas. He's a big money gambler. He does it for a living, and he's really good at it.
Is it Johnny Manziel?
No, it is not. It is not Johnny Manziel. But you know, he had money on this game on Ohio State at -3 or +3, and so he was kind of reacting, you know, watching this game with me. He's not an Ohio State guy, but he was reacting, wanting Ohio State to win, because obviously he had big money on it. And, I just told him, I said, after a couple of those calls, like that foul, the 3-point play on Luther Muhammad where he swipes down, he completely misses, by the way, and the ref just assumed contact and called a foul, wound up being a 3-point play. And then a couple possessions later, they get the ball into, I think it was Morgan inside, and then he gets a basket, and they call a foul on Andre Wesson, who was completely vertical at the time. Those two plays happen. They get a couple of 3-point plays, and all of a sudden Indiana's getting some momentum. And I made the comment then. I said, you know what? I said, this is not good. Indiana's offense is getting going. And he said, well, they haven't had any momentum. I said, yeah, not yet. But the problem is now the officials have just made a couple really, really bad phantom calls. I said, Ohio State's defense is going to overreact. They're going to get a little loose because of it. And sure enough, Indiana got going on that run. Now, the 3-pointers you can't do much about, but I thought there were a couple of drives where Indiana got too easily in that run because Ohio State's defense got a little lax because they were afraid of getting fouls called on them, because they were getting touched, hit with ticky-tack fouls. And I think that played a part. It's not all of it. Indiana was hitting some insane 3-pointers that you just have to shrug your shoulders. But I do think Ohio State's defense got a little lackadaisical because of those previous calls.
You're exactly right. I said the same thing to my father. I said, look, they got called a couple chippy things, and now they don't want to play defense. And it happens all the time. You see that with teams all the time. Instead of being aggressive on defense and bodying up, they'll just lean back, put their hands up, and hope for the best. That's just what the kind of defense they went into late in the game. But again, as you said, you can't do anything about the 3-pointers. I will say Big Ten basketball officiating is an abomination on this planet. It is god-awful. I can't even explain how bad. Look, we all complain about referees, but I will admit every other sport I watch, football, baseball, whatever, I think the officiating is overall pretty solid, even if there's a bad call here and there. All season watching Big Ten basketball officiating, it doesn't even matter. It's not even always in favor of the Buckeyes. It's just horrendous. It's unbelievably bad. I don't understand. Maybe it's the quota system for officiating where you got to hire every underprivileged, mentally challenged person you can find. I don't know, because these people just can't get these calls right, and they're not even that difficult. That's the crazy thing.
Well, to be fair, look, I mean, we all understand basketball is a difficult game to officiate. It really is, and it's especially difficult to officiate consistently because you have 3 refs, and they're constantly rotating, and they're going up and down the floor. So, one rep is going to be in the front court on one end, and then the next possession, he's going to be in the back court on the other end. There's no consistency there. You're calling front court players, and then you're calling back court players of the other team. You can't have any consistency because you're not in the same position. And, it's going to be that way till the end of time with basketball officiating. That's not their fault. But the problem I have with officiating is in a game like this, and you saw it so many times, they either guessed or they anticipated without actually seeing the call. And that's what drives me crazy when you see an official that calls one, there's a phantom call. That means you guessed, you didn't actually see the contact, or you thought you did, but you actually didn't. And then, or you're anticipating a call. Like there was one situation where Kyle Young got hit with a blocking foul where he moved his feet perfectly. He got in front of the defender. There was only a little bit of body contact, but he was perfectly vertical. He still got called for a foul. And the whistle came before the contact even happened because the whistle was, the official was pretty much expecting there to be a foul. He guessed, he anticipated, and he got the call wrong. And that's where basketball officials get it wrong so many times in my mind. It's because they're either guessing or they're anticipating. And that's where we're at, I think, in this time with Big Ten officiating.
Yeah, especially with Caleb Wesson, they guess quite a bit.
Oh, they always do.
Than most of the guys out there.
So, Corey, we kind of buried the lead a little bit, but let's move on to Caleb Wesson. That's a great segue because he comes back.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And here, I thought that you and Johnny were the only ones that had great segues together. So Caleb missed the last 125 minutes. It would have been 120, but they did come back and force Wisconsin game into overtime.
I thought you were going to say 125 games for just a second.
No,
that felt like 125 games.
That's a long suspension, though.
Your whole entire career plus.
Ohio State would not be in the tournament if he were suspended for 125 games. Let me promise you that. Yeah. But for the last 125 minutes, they didn't lead a single minute. And he comes back, and then, boom, they lead for 39 minutes. And it's not an accident. I think it's safe to say that there should be nobody out there in Buckeye Nation that is still saying Caleb Wesson is overrated, or Caleb Wesson shouldn't be starting, or Caleb Wesson is not very good. Can we put that narrative to rest now? Can we put it to bed?
If you're intelligent, I don't know how you argue against it. It's just, what is I would love to see somebody. Actually, I want to see that one Buckeye fan out there who just is, goes against the grain constantly. I'd like to see their argument of how he's actually overrated and doesn't matter to the team after witnessing the last 3 games versus this game. Well, it's Indiana. Well, they lost to Northwestern, the worst team in the Big Ten, by 18 without Caleb Wesson. Now they beat a thriving Indiana team that's been good for the past month. Beat Michigan State twice. They essentially dominated them, like we pointed out at the beginning of the show. Caleb Wesson, 17 and 13 today, obviously made a huge difference. And by the way, defensively, he made a big difference. That doesn't show up on the stats all the time. He had a couple blocks, but honestly, did you see him on the perimeter? He was bodying up guards on the perimeter at times.
You're absolutely
at the end of the game. He almost took the ball away from the point guard.
You're absolutely right about the perimeter, but I want to go back to your first point that you just made. I thought Ohio State's defense at the rim today was as good as we've seen it all season. Not just Caleb Wesson, but Musa Jallow on help defense, Kyle Young on help defense. Their rotations and their communication down at the rim today, I thought was as good and as impeccable as we've seen it this whole entire season.
Agreed. Look, especially Musa, by the way, he doesn't score points, but man, he is more valuable than I think a lot of fans will admit to. He doesn't have an offensive threat. I get that, but rebounding and defense, he might be our best defender on the team right now. You could argue. Some people in the beginning of the year would argue it was Luther, and they had a good argument. I think Musa right now has just kind of surpassed everybody.
And you know what?
Overall.
And people were asking on Twitter, why did Justin Ahrens not play very much? I think he got 1 or 2 minutes. That's why right there, because Musa was playing so well defensively. He fit the scouting report of what they were trying to do, because people got to understand Romeo Langford is a very, very tough matchup. They were trying to get their best physical defenders on Romeo Langford all game long. Luther Muhammad had the primary task, but Musa was in there on him as well. They were trying to get people to body him up and have long arms and make it tough for him at the rim and work on impairing his vision. That is why I think that Musa played so much today. They were willing to sacrifice the offense because for their defensive game plan, they really wanted to make it tough for Romeo Langford to get going. And you got to credit Chris Holtmann. I would have loved to see Ahrens play more than he did today, given the way he's played with Caleb out of the lineup. But based on the result alone, you have to say that I would say Holtmann and the staff rolled the dice correctly so with the result, because they had a great game plan and executed against Langford.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I get it too. I mean, there's times where I think even CJ's taking a last shot in games, I'd rather it be Ahrens, but I'd rather see, I'd like to see a lot more catch and shoot for Ahrens in our system, but that's probably all in due time. I also think that while you're right about the scouting report, I remember Holtmann expressed regret for starting so many freshmen against Purdue. And I think he's kind of in that mindset now when you see that Woods is starting instead of Luther, who Luther has not been great the past month. I admit that, but he's been a consistent starter the whole year, so why not now? And you got Ahrens not in the starting lineup anymore with Musa taking his place. I think he's also wanted to just go, hey, it's a big game against Indiana. We got to go with experience. I think he's trying to lean more on experience than what he did maybe in the last few games. Well, of course, the last few games he might not have had as much as an option with Caleb being out, but still, I think Holtmann wants to lean on experience because he knows that these games are absolutely vital to get into the tournament.
Keyshawn Woods, C.J. Jackson, Luther Muhammad, all 3 of them having great offensive games against Indiana on Thursday. When is the last time we said that? Have we said that in a game all season where all 3 played really well?
It's usually 2 out of the 3.
Yeah, it's usually one or 2. I don't think we've said all year long that all 3 of them had great offensive games at the same time.
I agree. And you know what? Luther's shot, it not just the fact that it went in, but you could see, the camera, the angle was behind him on a few of his shots for the 3-point line. You could see from the behind angle that it was lined up much better than it has been. I don't know what changed or what tweak he made in his form, but all I know is when it went to the basket, it was on a deadline to the basket.
He made 3, and he actually made a 4th because I know it doesn't count, but his foot was on the line. He got called for being out of bounds, but he made that 4th shot that didn't count. which is really encouraging because if you can get Luther's confidence back, we've been assuming he's hit a freshman wall, and I think that's part of it, but I think confidence is part of it too. If he can get that confidence back here going into the weekend, and then this Keyshawn Woods shows up, this is really good for Ohio State. And this Keyshawn Woods, this is the encouraging thing if you're Ohio State. Keyshawn Woods showed up in the second half against Wisconsin and helped lead them back on that comeback. It fell short. I think they ran out of gas in overtime, but he really took charge, and they came back. And then he follows it up with, I think, his best overall game as an Ohio State player this season. So you add in Keyshawn Woods and C.J. Jackson, who's now healthy, those two stepping up as seniors, and Luther Muhammad getting his confidence back. I know this is just one game. These are some ifs here. But, hey, if they go out on Friday and beat Michigan State and get a little confidence going, you just never know. You could carry that momentum into the tournament, and then, it's found money at that point.
Yeah, and they probably gained a ton of confidence coming back against Wisconsin the way they did. I mean, that's an obvious statement, but, I mean, think when Keyshawn acknowledged it today. You're down 23 at home to a very good team, a very good Wisconsin team, and you make that kind of furious comeback. Yeah, they didn't finish. I get that, but just to bring it into overtime was a miracle in itself. I actually, when it got down to 23 points, I just turned it off for a few minutes. I was like, this is so frustrating. They're not this bad. Why are they playing this bad? But then, of course, you follow on Twitter and you see the score start to shrink. You turn it back on. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Here they go, But, you're right about Keyshawn Woods. I was so impressed by him today. First of all, my favorite shot of the whole game was when they had their overturned the call because they called it out of bounds on us. They said it went through Weston's hands and it actually didn't. And we got the ball back with 2 seconds on the shot clock. And Keyshawn comes around the pick, and then he gets the ball in the corner and swishes it on a really nice mid-range jump shot. That's one thing Keyshawn, when he's on, he adds to the team. He has a really nice mid-range shot when he's on. Unfortunately, it's not consistent, but I love it. And I also love the fact when he got into the lane at times, instead of looking to pass like he usually does, and I love the guy. I really do. I love what he's added to the team, but I really wish he would be more aggressive. Gets into the lane. Instead of looking to pass, I'm 5 feet from the basket. I'm putting it up, So I loved his aggressiveness today. I love his leadership today. If he and CJ can continue to be aggressive. And I noticed that where they drove to the basket more often than they just settled for bad shots. Sometimes you have to force your way in there. You draw a foul or whatever. Just force your way and at least show the threat of doing it. I think, honestly, Holtman said it best. Our seniors played like seniors, and we won.
Well, and we've seen, I know you said this on Twitter. Some other people have said, where has this Keyshawn been all year long? We've seen him do this in small spurts. I mean, he's shown the ability and the talent to take over a game like this. He just has not done it for more than 1 or 2 games at a time, and then he disappears for a long time. I mean, honestly, he disappeared for the entire month of February. We're finally seeing him come back and be a little more assertive here in March. And I think you just said, and Chris Holtman said, I think that is hitting it dead on the money. I think the thing is we're seeing a senior who finally is starting to realize, you know what, this is it for me. I need to step up. I think he was afraid to step on toes for most of the year. He didn't feel like it was his team.
Yep.
And I don't think he's been very aggressive because of it. I think now he realizes, hey, we've been sucking lately. I'm a senior. Nobody else is stepping up. It's time for me to step up. I think that's what we're seeing from Keyshawn Woods, and his natural talent and ability is coming through because he's just saying, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to go out and play. And he's doing what we've seen the last 3 halves of basketball, going back to Wisconsin and then against Indiana on Thursday. That Keyshawn Woods, if he continues to show up the rest of the season, could lead Ohio State into a tournament run. I'm not saying they're going to the Final Four. I'm not jumping there yet. But that is, if they want to have any chance of making a run, that Keyshawn Woods has got to show up.
If this team somehow made a run to the Final Four, I'd give up on predicting anything in life. But you know what? I'm wrong about everything and everything in life. Forget it. I can't. Nobody could perceive something like that. And I'm just hoping they get to the second round. That's what I'm hoping.
But you know what? That's an interesting. You and I were talking about this early Thursday afternoon, and I want to get into that because that's an interesting subject. So many people, make comments like, "Well, this Ohio State team's not good enough to win a game," or "This Ohio State team's not good enough to make a tournament run." And look, I'm not trying to sell anybody on this Ohio State team going to the Final Four, but what I will tell you is, a lot of mediocre teams have made runs in the NCAA tournament. You know, are you telling me anybody expected Loyola Chicago to make a Final Four run last year, or George Mason in 2006, or VCU in, 2011? Butler made the first run that they made was completely improbable as an 8 seed. Teams make runs all the time that you would have never guessed were good enough to win more than 1 or 2 games in the NCAA tournament. So to say Ohio State can't win a game or two in the NCAA tournament, that's preposterous. I mean, if you are good enough to be an at-large team, you're good enough to win a game. UMBC, as a 16 seed, beat a 1 seed last year. I promise nobody thought they were good enough to win a game in the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, Ohio State is probably not consistent enough and probably not very likely to make a run. But I'm just saying, you cannot rule anything out. Ohio State certainly has enough talent. They can knock anybody off if they play well.
Yeah, I agree. But, you know, you're missing one thing, Kyle. And the only problem
just
Ohio
one
State
thing
has is
there's
never been an upset. There's never been an upset in tournament history. So if they're a 12 seed, they're not going to win anyway.
Yeah, people forget that 5-12. If they end up a 12 seed, and I'm on record as saying 11, but remember that 5-12 matchup is dangerous. I think all time in the 64 team / 68 team era, I think 12 seeds have won like 40 or 45% of the time in that matchup. So it is dangerous to be playing any 12 seed.
I can promise you, if Keyshawn keeps playing the way he's playing, we keep showing aggressiveness and the seniors play like seniors and we get like an 11th or 12th seed, whichever it is, I can promise you that 5th or 6th seeded team does not want to see us. Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, everybody's talking about, well, I don't want Ohio State to see this team or that team, but, you know, it's a two-sided coin. You know, that Ohio State team that we saw play against Indiana, and I don't know if they're going to come back and play this way against Michigan State or not. But if they show up again that way against Michigan State, this quarterfinal, first of all, a quarterfinal is historically terrible for high seeds in conference tournaments. You don't want to be a 1 or 2 seed playing in the quarterfinal in the first day of the tournament, because I tell you, historically, especially on early afternoon games, because you're kind of sleepy. You know, Michigan State's case, they've already beat Ohio State twice. Granted, they were competitive games. Remember, Ohio State was leading at the 5 and 8 minute marks, respectively, of those first 2 meetings against Michigan State. So they were in the game. And now you're playing a team, if you're Michigan State, you're playing a team you beat twice, and then you've got to get up, play that quarterfinal game where Ohio State already has their feet under them. They played a game the day before. They've got a little momentum, a little confidence going. This is a dangerous matchup for Michigan State, and Ohio State is a dangerous team to be playing if they play like that.
And Ohio State's playing with house money at the moment. And, my Michigan State fan friend, he actually said, thank you, Ohio State, for beating Indiana, because, of course, Indiana beat them twice. And I thought to myself, I get it. It's probably a more favorable matchup with us. Since you beat us twice, you're more confident. But I think you just hit the nail on the head. You don't want an overconfident Michigan State team going in there. Like you said, in the middle of, beginning of afternoon, 12:30 p.m., not on a home court. It's a neutral court. Now Ohio State, after coming back against Wisconsin, after showing that they can actually get up on by I think the confidence booster it is. I mean, an Indiana team that's been on fire, who beat Michigan State twice, who you're playing next, and you just got up by 20 on them at one point in the game. You have to believe you can beat Michigan State going into the next game. I'm not saying they will. I don't know what they'll do. I think we don't match up as well, mainly because of the Nick Ward situation, as Indiana does against them. But still, if Woods is aggressive, Jackson's aggressive, Luther's able to contribute offensively, and you got Washington and Aaron's able to hit a couple shots, you never know.
Well, Ohio State, in the first 2 meetings combined, led for 58 out of 80 minutes against Michigan State. 58 out of 80 minutes.
It's true.
So, look, if you're Michigan State, you're bringing back Nick Ward. Yes, that's a good thing. But you've also been playing without Nick Ward for an entire month. So how are you going to integrate a guy in his first game back? That's not always as easy as people think. Like, Ohio State integrated Caleb Wesson successfully, but he was only out for 3 games. Nick Ward has missed, I think, 7, 8, 9 games or something like that. They're going to have to integrate him against a team that has shown they could play with Michigan State. And if you put him in there and then all of a sudden your offense has been playing one way and now you have to get back to playing with him in the lineup, it's not easy. It's easier said than done. I'll just say that. I'm not saying Ohio State is going to beat Michigan State, but I'm telling you, this has the makings of a really close nip and tuck game that I think will come down to the wire, and we'll see if Ohio State learned from the first two matchups where they fell apart the last 5 minutes of each of those games. We'll see if they can actually take it down to the wire and finish this time.
Yeah, I think the big difference will be if Woods continues to be the senior and Jackson continues. Jackson had a good game, by the way, for those who don't know, but for those who they continue to be the seniors, like in crunch time when we're tied with 5 minutes to go, we need guys that'll say, okay, it's on me. Give me the ball. We haven't had that most of the year. We have guys that now, like I said on the last podcast, they're unselfish to a fault, just looking to pass the ball. I actually saw that more today against Indiana. The passes were more crisp. They were quicker. They were more decisive. They just looked more decisive overall, obviously because Caleb draws a lot of attention, so it opens things up on the perimeter. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. We'll see how it does with Michigan State with their superior athletes. But that being said, if they're more decisive in what they want to do, if they go to the basket a lot more and just at least challenge the defense, unlike they've done in the past, they have to at least challenge. I'm not saying they're going to beat Michigan State. I do think it's going to be extremely competitive to the wire at least.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jackson. I mean, him and Woods combined against Indiana for 35 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, and just 3 turnovers. That kind of production from Woods and Jackson, Ohio State, look, they can win the Big Ten tournament if they get that kind of production the rest of the way. And
agreed.
Who knows? We haven't seen consistency from this team, so they may show up on Michigan against Michigan State and combine on 2 of 15 from the field. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen with them. They're unpredictable, and that's why we're in the situation with this Ohio State team. But if they show up like that the rest of the tournament, they can win this thing. They really can.
Exactly, and they just proved that they don't need Wesson to win it, I guess, just from some fans' perspective. I'm kidding, obviously. Good Lord. I mean, that guy he's the best player on the team. Just, you got to, he is what he is. I mean, they did, I mean, you read all offseason, they designed the offense around him for a reason. I mean, Holton's no dummy. So when you lose him for 3 games and you're trying to adjust on the fly, it's a little difficult. So it's great to have him back. I'm not going to be able to watch the game tomorrow because I got to work, unfortunately. Thank you, Big Ten tournament, for having these things during the week. But I'm going to keep up with the score for sure and keep up on Twitter. Thanks to Kyle and all you guys out there who like to keep the updates rolling. Keep them rolling tomorrow because I'm going to be on my Twitter feed constantly trying to see what's going on.
What is your prognostication for the Michigan State game and possibly beyond?
You know what? I hate to pick against them, but I do think Michigan State will win probably by 5 to 7 points. They're just more experienced, a little bit more athletic, and Izzo's a great coach, obviously. But I do think they get to the tournament, 11th or 12th seed. I think 12th will probably be it, but you could be right too. I think they can win one game. I think they could upset somebody and win one game in the tournament and get to the second round.
I'm going to say they take Michigan State down to the wire. I'm going to say they lose a close game, but it would not shock me if they win. I know that's hedging a little bit. I'm trying to play both sides here. I think that they lose a close game, but I really, truly, I honestly I would not be surprised in the least if they wind up beating Michigan State.
That's funny. I'm sorry. It's like they could win, they could lose.
Yeah, I know, right? Brilliant analysis on the Unscripted Ohio podcast from Kyle Lamb. They could win, they could lose. I think that covers every base. I expect them to lose a really close game. I think this will go down to the wire. I think they play Michigan State really tough. I think they'll lose a close game by a couple points. But if they win, it would not surprise me at all. And this sets up an interesting scenario because Nebraska is playing Wisconsin on Friday, and Nebraska has won 2 games so far. They beat Rutgers, and then they beat Maryland, which Maryland, continual underachiever. This team is too talented to be losing in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. But Nebraska will be playing Wisconsin in the quarterfinal, and they've been winning with 6 scholarship players the last couple of days. So it sets up an interesting scenario because let's say Ohio State pulls off the upset against Michigan State, and Nebraska is able to upset Wisconsin, then all of a sudden you've got Ohio State in the semifinal playing a Nebraska team that will be playing its 4th game in 4 days with 6 scholarship players. That would be interesting because then all of a sudden it's like if you're Ohio State, you're in a golden position to potentially advance to the Big Ten championship.
And then people will still be arguing we don't belong in the tournament.
You're going to have that. There are people still saying that, and it's like, you know what? go do yourself a favor and look at the other teams on the bubble. You're going to quickly shut up about it, I promise. Ohio State, in a normal year, maybe they don't belong in the NCAA tournament. I don't know. You can make that argument, but it's not a normal year. And relative to the rest of the bubble, Ohio State is in golden position. I will reiterate, they will see their name pop up in the bracket on Sunday in the selection show, which, by the way, if you missed this, fans that were upset last year about them doing the alphabetical order of all the teams in the field, they are ditching that, and they are going back to the traditional bracket unveiling the way they've done in the past. So you will not have to see that stupid alphabetical order this year.
That was horrible, but the way I want them to win, I want them to win the Michigan State game by Justin Ahrens hitting the game-winning three in his brother's face. That would just be the best thing ever.
That's a very specific way to go out. I hope that happens, not just for your sake or for Justin's sake, but that would be a poetic ending for sure.
Well, when Kyle hit the three-pointer in front of Justin Ahrens on the bench, I love the story where it rolls in barely, and you hear Justin apparently was heard saying, "Oh my God."
That was crazy. So, hey, Corey, before we wrap up, I want to touch on a football topic here because I saw something interesting. You and I are not Browns fans, obviously. I know you're holding your breath right now because you don't know where I'm going with this. But no, I saw an interesting topic posted on the Horseshoe Lounge on Buckeye Grove by Kirk Barton, former Ohio State captain and staff member over at Buckeye Grove. So Kirk posted
Chicago Bear, I think.
Yes, that's right, and Chicago Bear. He posted an interesting topic, and I want to touch on this. You guys are free. Feel free to tweet at me if you are a Browns fan and have an opinion on this, because I am curious how Browns fans feel about this. Tweet at me at KYLam8. But so he posted an interesting question. If you're a Browns fan, what are you more excited by? The acquisition of Odell Beckham Jr. by the Browns or the acquisition of Justin Fields by Ohio State at quarterback? And I thought this was an interesting question just because if I'm putting myself in the position of a Browns fan, I can understand there are probably a lot of people saying Odell Beckham because this is the first time the Browns have been relevant and it's exciting, and all of a sudden there's a roster ahead of the Browns fans where you can legitimately say, hey, we've got a playoff team potentially. We might advance in the playoffs. Odell Beckham's one of the best receivers in the game. I can see why some would say Odell Beckham, but me personally, and this is why I'm asking your opinion on it, Corey, you, like me, since you're not a Browns fan, just projecting objectively, what do you think is the bigger deal?
That's tough because I do understand Browns fans. The team hasn't been good since they've come back to Cleveland, except for I think one playoff appearance. Wow, that's tough, man. I don't like the NFL as much as I do college, so I'd probably go Justin Fields, even if I was a Browns fan, because it's exciting. But that being said, I do understand the Browns fans who are more excited about Beckham because Ohio State you kind of expect to be good, and the Browns you kind of, for the longest time, you just expected them to, they're going to be what they are. And now you look at their roster, it's not just good for this year, it looks good for the foreseeable future. That's pretty exciting stuff for them. So I could understand a Browns fan saying Beckham, but for me personally, one of the highest ranked out of high school quarterbacks of all time transferring to Ohio State to work with Coach Day and Coach Yursich and Coach Wilson. I mean, that could be extremely fun to watch, and you could potentially, whereas I know a lot of Browns fans are saying Super Bowl. I actually think Ohio State has a better chance to win the national title than the Browns do the Super Bowl. So,
well, and I can see it from this standpoint because I have a lot of friends that we've had these kind of conversations. I know a lot of people that would say, would you rather see an Ohio State national championship in football or an Ohio State national championship in basketball or a Blue Jackets Stanley Cup? Stuff like that. That kind of subject comes up a lot. And a lot of people I hear answer the Blue Jackets Stanley Cup or the Ohio State basketball championship. And it's only because it's like, most of us now in our lifetimes, we've seen Ohio State win a couple national titles. We saw 2002, we saw 2014. They're fresh in people's mind. And even though Ohio State football may be numero uno in your hearts, and number one on the priority list as far as rooting interests, you've seen the Ohio State football national championship. So I think some of you might answer a Browns Super Bowl over an Ohio State football championship because you haven't seen the Browns Super Bowl ever. You've seen the old, the old NFL or the old NFL championships, but you haven't actually seen. And you weren't. Most of you probably weren't alive for those anyway. But you haven't seen the Browns Super Bowl win. So I'm thinking, that might color into the pick a little bit too. Odell Beckham's acquisition may be more exciting just because it gets you closer to something that you have never seen happen.
No, and I get it. I'm not going to begrudge anybody who feels that way. It doesn't mean they're not really a Buckeye fan. It just, if I could put it into something where I could step into their shoes, I'll compare Ohio State basketball versus Ohio State football. Which would I rather see? Right now, I'd rather see basketball. For the exact same reason you listed, is because I have never seen an Ohio State basketball national title. We came close, but we never seen a national title for a basketball team. I'd love to see one in my lifetime. I don't know if I ever will, but I'd love to see one in my lifetime, even above a football championship. But I'll take a football championship if it happens.
I want to say this to Browns fans, because if you guys have listened to me, you probably know I'm a Bengals fan. Some of you do. I don't talk about it a whole lot here on the show, but I am a Bengals fan. But I am happy for Browns fan because this is legitimately, it's an exciting roster. I think the Browns have positioned themselves with their clear AFC North favorites. And, look, they have to go out and do it first. They have to go win. Nothing is a given yet. So you got to keep that in mind. But I am happy for Browns fans that there is something to be excited about. But I see a lot of people on Twitter talking about the age of the Browns offense and all these guys are going to be around so long. Look, I'm just warning you, this is not like baseball. A young football roster can change in a hurry. Baseball, if you've got a young core, if you've got a bunch of 23 to 27-year-olds, you got locked up for a long time, you have a chance to really put together a dynasty. In football, it can vanish in a hurry. 2-3 years from now, it can be completely gone. So I would say just focus on winning now. Don't worry about whether or not your team's going to be a dynasty for 4 or 5 years. Just worry about getting the wins this season and go from there and be excited about that, because honestly, you just don't know how long it's going to last. Granted, I'm a little jaded here because as a Bengals fan, 5 years ago, I saw a young Bengals roster, and I thought that the Bengals were going to have 3 Super Bowl titles in the next 5 years. No, I didn't really think that.
Even with Marvin Lewis, you thought that? Oh,
no,
man.
I didn't really think that. But you know what I'm saying. Young rosters in the NFL get old and outdated in a hurry. So if you're a Browns fan, just enjoy this year and go from there. Get that playoff bid, get some wins under your belt, and just enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, they're loading up on talent, and Dorsey, by the way, is an excellent GM. I've been saying it even before he was the Chiefs. I wanted Green Bay to get him instead of the guy we got. I'm a Packers fan, for those who don't know. But Dorsey, when he went to the Browns, you knew he was going to be good. Is it now? When you assemble all this talent, and there's going to be a lot of people wanting more money down the road. It's like Bill Belichick is a genius at this, prioritizing the talent as it goes forward. Like you said, because no roster stays the same. Now you got to realize, okay, what's most important? What are the most important pieces that I have to keep, and what are the pieces that I can replace? That'll be a challenge in and of itself. That's probably a bigger challenge than even building the roster from the beginning.
It really is. You've got to know. I don't envy a GM in a situation where you have a younger roster and maybe it doesn't work out or you have some injuries, because you have to know, you have to make some really important roster decisions of how long to hold on to a guy. How long is he going to stay at his peak? The Bengals are kind of going through this with A.J. Green and Andy Dalton now. They've actually got a very young roster. People don't realize that the Bengals were one of the youngest rosters in the league last year, but they had a quick turnover, and now they're in this position where do you hang on to A.J. Green because you might get an 8-8, 9-7 season? That's not an easy decision to make. And I think the Browns right now are in a great position for the next couple of years. And you're right, John Dorsey is a great GM. And some of you may remember a tweet I made the other night. I'm not trying to say John Dorsey hasn't done a fantastic job, because he has. I think it's just important to remember, when you walk into a situation with $100 million in cap space, 11 draft picks, including 2 top 5 picks, that's a great amount of resources. And credit to John Dorsey, he's hit a home run in how he tackled those resources. So the the Browns are in a great position. And like you said, it'll be interesting to see how they manage that roster the next few years.
Yeah, he showed some cojones with some of his picks. Taking Baker wasn't the most popular pick. Taking Ward wasn't the most popular pick, but they look like they're panning out, at least thus far. If Ward can stay healthy, he's a top 5 corner potentially, the way he's played. And Baker, my goodness, he had arguably the best rookie season ever for a quarterback. So, and he outplayed the 3 other guys. And Baker was not the consensus number 1 guy. It was not a year where, it's this guy. It's clearly Andrew Luck. It wasn't that. It was like, well, which one do you take? And he hit a home run.
I am proud to be on the right side of history when it comes to Baker Mayfield. I was saying all along, you can check my tweets on this, go back there. I'm sure under advanced search, they are there somewhere. I was saying all along the Browns should take Baker Mayfield. I never backed off that statement, and I am proud to be on the right side of history.
A good call. I was very neutral. I was Sweden on this. I thought, you know what? I can't argue against Mayfield, so go ahead, take him. Because I thought Darnold might be the best, but I wasn't sure. I think Darnold will still be pretty good. I just don't know if he'll be as good as Mayfield now. But you never know after the rookie seasons. Robert Griffin III had a fantastic rookie year, and his quarterback coach at the time is now the Green Bay head coach. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But it doesn't. When you have a rookie year, it doesn't mean you automatically have that great career. It doesn't mean I think Baker will be a really good player for a very long time.
No, that's not what I heard you say. I heard you say Baker Mayfield is going to suck. It was just a fluke season.
You read you read right through me, buddy. I don't know how you.
No, Corey did not say that, and he did not mean that. I think we're in agreement here. No, he's just saying in general, you just never know after a rookie year. But you're right, Baker's the real deal. There's no doubt about that. I would be shocked if anything other than injuries don't have a long and successful career for Mayfield.
Yeah, and I noticed one play last year where he was smiling before the snap. Then you know that a rookie, this game is slowed down for a rookie.
The swag,
because he saw something.
The pre-snap swag.
Exactly. When they smile and they know they see something, it's like, oh man, that guy, he's not scared out there.
No, he went into Ohio Stadium and took down Ohio State. That guy's legit. There's no doubt about it. He is. The Browns got themselves a good one for a long period of time, and hopefully this will lead to a lot of success for the Browns. And I say that even as a Bengals fan, so I'm very sincere that I hope it works out. Well, hey, Corey, this worked out. I'm glad you were able to come back on for some basketball talk. I thoroughly enjoyed your presence. I know you probably don't hear that enough from Johnny, but I will say it.
I don't even know how to react right
now. You can react by just thanking me and moving along, so this doesn't get too sappy here.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. You can catch Corey, of course, as co-host with Johnny Lunsford on Wednesdays on the Scarlet and Great podcast here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. You can catch him on Twitter, and God forbid, I don't know why you want to, at Scarlet Great CT. That's going to do it for us. You can catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. Of course, the Unscripted Ohio podcast airs every Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. You can also catch us on any of your archives of choice, be SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. That's going to wrap it up for the show today. Thanks again to my co-host, the esteemed Corey Thompson. Hope everybody has a great weekend watching Big Ten basketball and the selection show on Sunday. We will be back on Monday to recap where Ohio State finished in the tournament, as well as where they will pop up and play this next week in the NCAA tournament. Have a great weekend, everybody. Go Bucks.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.